welcome back to my channel. This is Mimi, and we're finally moving on to V3 Chapter 3's chapter review? After the last video, I'm still not really sure what to call it, but I think I'll just keep calling them chapter reviews because they're essentially the same thing. And after making the script for this video, I think it's still just like the other chapter reviews, and I didn't really mean to make it like that, but oh well. It might be longer than I intended it to be, but there really was a lot that happened in this chapter and a lot that I wanted to talk about. So we'll see how long it is, but however long it is, I'm just gonna say everything that stuck out to me and why it stuck out to me, and maybe some of the things that bothered me or things that I really enjoyed. So without further ado, let's get into V3 Chapter 3. Also, I apologize if you hear some background noise because I'm recording in a different location, and I hope that you can't hear anything too loudly, but if there's a little bit of an echo or a buzzing noise, please don't mind that. I'm sorry. Now, for this video, I don't normally write scripts, but I did a couple of bullet points of things that I wanted to go over. So if things sounds a little mixed up or out of order, that's why, and I'm sorry, but hopefully I can get all of my thoughts across in the right way. The thing that stuck out to me the most in this chapter was character development. One thing that I was really concerned about in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is the pacing and who was getting character development. Because honestly, compared to other Danganronpa games, and by others I mean specifically the second because the first wasn't the best at character development either, I was really concerned about characters not actually changing or getting any sort of development. But luckily it seems like that's not the case, at least for this chapter, and I really did appreciate it. Aside from Miyu and Tsumugi, I feel like every character has gotten some kind of development, which is a bit disappointing because I'd really appreciate Tsumugi and Miyu to get something so they don't end up like Kazuichi per se, where they really didn't have any sort of development. Or even Akane, I was so frustrated that they were pushing her toward change and she never actually really changed by the end of the game, which was very frustrating, and so I'm hoping they're not going to do it to this game. Now, another thing that stuck out a lot during this chapter was Kaito and Maki and Shuichi, is the fact that everything that Kaito did for Shuichi in Chapter 2, he's now doing for Maki. And it is really great finally having characters build up strong and important connections to each other, because in the second game, there were a lot of characters that had connections, like Sonya and Gundam, Akane and Nekomaru, Chiaki and Hajime, just like so many characters that were important to each other, and I feel like in this game, that is really not happening as much until this chapter. This chapter is finally starting to push some other relationships, and one of those being Kaito, Maki, and Shuichi. I really love the idea of them being a trio and Kaito being the one to help them see change, and then Shuichi and Maki moving forward on that change. And I really did like how this chapter made me like Maki a lot more, because previously I was worried about if I was going to like her because I have nothing against her and I liked her character, but of course she didn't really have any sort of development or importance yet, and now she's finally starting to have that, and I'm really appreciating it. I will admit, her constantly telling people to go die all the time is getting a bit old, but I mean, that's just how she is, and I think that's a good thing. Now, one thing that also was interesting to me was the fact that Gonta kept mentioning seeing bugs, or thinking that he saw bugs, but he didn't actually see bugs, and that was very interesting because he also mentioned this in previous chapters. And I think that's going to be important, but I'm not exactly sure why. If I had to guess, maybe it's the fact that this might be some kind of virtual reality and Gonta seeing literal bugs in the system, or something along those lines, because I really don't understand what he's seeing or why he's seeing it, but I really do feel like it's very important. Aside from all the other places you unlocked, the place that stuck out to me the most was the 4th floor. I really liked the 4th floor in this game. I really like the creepy ambiance, and I really enjoy the music. As soon as we went up there, one of the things I noticed was how much I liked the soundtrack they used. I think it's a really big contrast. It kind of reminds me of where the tragedy happened in the first game, that sort of ambiance, and I really like that ambiance, especially this early in the game. And I keep saying ambiance, I'm sorry. But I really did like the fourth floor, and I instinctively knew that it was going to be important. And it looks like my theories about characters who die need to have their ultimate lab unlocked first is still holding true. I was keeping that in mind once we unlocked the new labs, and the new labs we unlocked were Tenko, Anji, and Korekiyo. I don't think we unlocked another one, but I might be forgetting it, so I apologize if I am. But I did know that that solidified the fact that they were now, quote-unquote, able to die. As soon as we saw the 3 empty rooms with the hole in the corner that are on the 4th floor, I instantly knew they were going to be used for murder. It's really hard for me to describe how I solve mysteries in Danganronpa because normally people would put together logical things or find fallacies in other characters' arguments or logics. But I just have these feelings and I just know they're true. And so when we saw the 3 rooms, I was like, this is a murder room, someone's gonna die in here, I don't know how they're gonna die, but this is where they're gonna die, and that ended up happening. Now, one scene that I really liked was Tenko's lab. When you first find it, is Tenko body slamming Shuichi and Himiko, because this chapter did so much for Tenko, because originally I thought that Tenko would be my least favorite character, and after this chapter, I think Tenko is my favorite girl in all of V3. And I really like her and think she was very well executed and just a wonderful character. The way she reads other characters' emotions is extremely honest, and I honestly would have liked if there was some way to know what she would say after body slamming someone like Kokichi. Because if she can truly read their emotions, I would love to see what she says about some of the more odd characters. But her saying that Shuichi lacks confidence in himself and Himiko is scared to show emotions is a very prevalent theme, and I really appreciate how Tenko is still nice and friends to Shuichi despite having the whole degenerate male thing. A lot of people got annoyed with her for that, but it's really not as annoying or bad as I thought it would be, and that might be because I myself am not a male, so I probably can't speak for this, but I thought that I would get really upset at her speaking like that all the time, but she really never does. It only shows up a couple times each chapter, and regardless, she still cares about the males. And then, of course, the fact that Himiko's scared to show emotions is extremely important, and the fact that Tenko can recognize that. And it just breaks your heart, because we all know how important that is later on in the chapter, and I do think that it's good that Tenko recognizes what is scaring Himiko. And as much as I might not like to admit it, and you'll learn why, Anji was also able to recognize the fact that Himiko was scared. Although she didn't outright mention that she was scared to show her fear, she did mention that she had other feelings that she wasn't letting on to, which was very important. Now, there's always really cute CGs in this, and I really appreciate how much artwork is in this game, and I've mentioned that multiple times, but one of my favorite CGs and moments in this chapter was Maki training with Kaito and Shuichi. I think it's adorable how she is, and just seeing the 3 of them all be so close and working together toward their goal is just so heartwarming, and the CG is adorable, and Maki is a boss. That was a wonderful thing to see. Now, let's move on to the more plot part of this chapter, and I'll start by saying how I felt about the motive. Now, the motive put a lot of questions into my mind and didn't answer any of them, so that's great, but I'm sure that they will be answered eventually. That's how Danganronpa is. It's hint, 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 and then exposition. So, as you should know before watching this video, because it has extreme spoilers, you are able to resurrect one of the people who died and bring them back as a transfer student. What? Because this game has been very odd with its motives. Like, It's a bit difficult for me to describe, but with the first chapter and the third chapter, the motives are things that you're not sure if they're true because they didn't happen, but knowing Monokuma, they're most likely true because Monokuma doesn't lie. But the thing about that is, it's not possible to bring the dead to life. And unlike Anji saying that they're actually alive and they're hiding, I think that there's no way that's possible. Although I will admit it's not a 100% thing, I personally believe that there's no possible way they're alive, at least in this context. There may be other ways, but I won't get into that right now, but I don't think that they're hiding somewhere in the school or anything like that. So the fact that you can resurrect one of the dead makes me really, really believe that this is some kind of virtual reality or machine or dream world or something, because of course there's no possible way to resurrect the dead. And so I'm guessing that this is going to be maybe similar to the Neo World program, as I've mentioned before, but there's no real way to know yet. Now, this might make a lot of people dislike me, or they might really disagree with my opinion, and if you do disagree, please be vocal about how you feel. I am more than willing to discuss with you about this. But this chapter, and even before this chapter, honestly, Anji is my least favorite V3 character, and she made me very upset the entire time I was playing Chapter 3. I just thought it was so annoying how she made the student council, and how she just kept pushing this idea of everyone staying there, and I can understand how she wants everyone to get along, and she's maybe trying to prevent the killing in her own way, but she even outright said she was ready to sacrifice one of the people there. I feel like she just uses Atua as an excuse for everything that she does. She covered the manhole, which didn't allow them to escape. She broke the flashback light. Who knows what was in that memory, and she just broke it. When it happened, I was actually very mad and was ranting a bit, but I've calmed down a bit since then, but I'm still really annoyed that I don't know what was in that flashback light, and I just feel like she didn't need to go to the extent that she did. She may have been trying to prevent a killing, but she was making the entire class way more divided and way more chaotic, and she was making it so that a killing was bound to happen soon, which just sounds like the opposite of what she was trying to accomplish. And also, Anji coming up to Maki at night and telling her that she's not allowed to walk around solely because of her ultimate talent made me extremely annoyed. That scene made me like Maki way more and like Anji way less, because coming up to her and telling her that she's not allowed to walk around at night and having everyone be so suspicious of Maki this entire chapter was so annoying, because as I said before, I don't really have a lot of rhyme or reason for the things that I think about, especially in Danganronpa, but I just knew that Maki is a good person, and it just makes sense. And so the fact that nobody else could see that aside from Kaito and Shuichi was extremely frustrating. One thing that I did like revolving the student council, though, and honestly, the whole entire student council was extremely annoying to me, but the fact that Tenko infiltrated the student council to watch over Himiko and just have access to that for her own reasons was extremely helpful, and I really, really liked, because when I saw Tenko being part of the student council, I didn't really understand, especially how they didn't have a scene showing Tenko appreciating Anji. And so I didn't, honestly, though this might sound a little bit dumb, I didn't really think about the fact that she wasn't actually part of the student council, but I didn't think about the fact that she was part of it. Like, I didn't, it's really hard to describe, but I didn't think about Tenko when it came to the student council at all. And so when they did mention that, I was like, oh, because I forgot that she was in it. And so that was really interesting to me. I don't know why, it just kind of stuck out. And then that one scene where Tenko is upset with Himiko for not showing her emotions was, oh my gosh, she got mad at Himiko and wanted her to express her feelings and her anger and just anything to her, which was so touching, and it really broke my heart that Himiko was ignoring her, because Himiko honestly needed development desperately. And she was not changing from chapter 1 to chapter 2. The fact that she was still staying the same was extremely frustrating, and I just wanted her to listen to Tenko and do what she was saying, because Tenko honestly cares about her and loves her. So that scene really broke my heart. I want to move on to the class trial now, because I don't have a lot to say about the class trial, but I do have some things that I want to talk about. And I know that I'm not going to be going over the nitty-gritty and the details, but hopefully me talking about the big points that actually mattered will be more interesting. A lot of things that I wrote down on this script are a bit odd or out of context, so if I just mention a specific quote I really liked, I'd just talk about that and then move on. So even though it's not the most organized, please forgive me this once. Now, the first thing I wrote down is, before the class trial, Korekiyo says the quote, "Miyu, every time you open your mouth, you become less likable." And I disagree with that, because honestly, Miyu, even though she's just a comic relief character, she's kind of growing on me, and a lot of other characters are really growing on me during this entire experience. Like, for example, Oma. Last chapter, I thought Oma was the most annoying thing, but now I'm actually starting to appreciate him more. I'm going to talk more about Oma toward the ends of this video, but I'll just continue on for now. This is kind of referencing Danganronpa's chapter 3 in Danganronpa 2, in the fact that Nagito said, when you investigate with a suspect in mind, you're going to get different results than just investigating. And that is entirely true. I try not to have just one suspect. I try to at least have a few and consider other possibilities. But in this chapter, just like the last one, I feel like it was extremely obvious who the killer was. And I feel really disappointed, because I feel like Danganronpa isn't as confusing as it once was. Like, in chapter 3 of Danganronpa 2, the killer is so unclear, at least for a while. I will say it did become quite obvious. Like in Danganronpa 2 chapter 1, for example, you would never guess that killer upon first glance. And so I'm really confused as to why it's so easy to guess the killers for these chapters. But that might just be me, as usual. So one thing that really made me suspect Korekiyo was the fact that during the beginning of the class trial, Miyu immediately suspects Korekiyo. And the thing that's interesting to me about that is that during the non-stop debate that happens, Miyu says that Korekiyo is the only one who cared about his stupid katana, which is of course a really dumb argument, but it's coming from Miyu. And then Korekiyo says that he doesn't care about his katana for some reason, and that's his defense. Honestly, there was a lot of problems with Miyu's thinking and with her accusations, but the fact that Kyo would lie about liking his own katana in his ultimate lab was really weird, especially after he talked about how much he liked it. There was even a scene about it with Kokichi, and so I just thought that was such a weird defense to use. It almost reminds me of Hiyoko, the way that she'll make up random BS to defend herself, even if she's completely innocent. But moving on, another kind of random quote is the fact, it's the fact that Miyu said that Kibo doesn't qualify as human, and Kibo just let that remark slide, but when it's Oma, he freaks out, which I thought was kind of funny, because the relationship between Miyu and Kibo is, interesting. Anyway, another quote that I really liked was the fact that Oma, it talks about the fact that no one could have gotten in except for the student council members, and then they said, no, well, Oma could have gotten in because he can lockpick. But then Oma's like, you're right, the culprit was me all along. And I don't know why, but that made me laugh, because normally Oma's lies are just, they can be minimal or outrageous, and they are really frustrating to me. But now I'm starting to find them really amusing, even if they make the class trial last longer and make the other people think really dumb stuff. It's just funny to see Oma, because Now, I'm going to go a little bit more on a sidetrack to just talk about Oma's intelligence right now. Oma is a smart person, and it's really interesting to see a smart person among some people that may not be qualified as the most smart. One thing that I'm really curious is how Oma's smartness compares to Nagito's, because they're sort of having the same role in the game, just like Byakuya as the antagonist. They're the one who makes class trials last longer, and they bring in a sort of wild card element that makes you not sure what to expect. But the thing about Oma is that I don't know, because he's full of lies. One thing that I think is very much the opposite of Nagito is that Nagito does lie on occasion, but he's an extremely honest person. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like during the entire thing of Danganronpa 2, it was extremely easy for me to understand Nagito's intentions. At least until chapter 4, then it started to get a bit confusing, but still, I could really understand and relate to Nagito, I guess. But with Oma, I don't understand his intentions yet. I can understand a lot about him, and I can predict some of his movements and what he's going to do, but I really, in the long run, don't know why he acts the way he does or what he's doing, because it just doesn't make sense yet. And I really do hope that it does make sense later, because at the moment, it can be pretty frustrating when Oma pulls some BS out of his back pocket, but at the same time, he's an extremely smart and amusing character. Now, I'm gonna move more on to who the killer was, and I did, as I said, guess who the killer was way earlier on, and it was the fact that Korekiyo is the murderer. I thought it was painfully obvious that he was a killer, and I also thought it was quite obvious that he was the only killer. Now, that might sound weird because Monokuma did bring up the rule that there could be 2 separate killers and that only one of them would be punished. But the thing about that is, I know Kodaka, and I know he wouldn't do that. At least not when you're first implementing this rule. He wouldn't exercise it to that extent. And so I saw some other people who were playing through the chapter who thought there might be multiple killers, but the entire chapter there was not one moment where I thought there were multiple killers. Even when Kyo said there were multiple, I didn't believe a single thing he was saying. Now, moving on toward the end of the class trial, I am so confused about Korekiyo and his sister. Like, I will say, I didn't predict this, but I did know that his sister signified some importance, because in, I believe it was chapter 2, when you unlock the swimming pool, if you talk to Korekiyo outside of it, he mentions his sister. And I don't remember exactly what he says, but I just remember him mentioning her that one line. And so seeing her come back, but in such a weird way, was really weird. Like, I don't know if his sister actually possesses him or if he's just a psychopath, but I do feel bad for him because something had to have happened to him in his childhood for him to have such a twisted mindset and way of thinking. In order for you to have feelings toward a sibling like that and to lose them to death is extremely traumatizing, and I can understand a bit of why he is the way he is, and I feel bad because he's just a high school student. But oh my goodness gracious. The thing that made me dislike Korekiyo a lot, which previously I actually did like him a bit, but the thing that I really did dislike is that he is a murderer. And now here is where I want to draw some parallels to Toko, because in every single Danganronpa game, they have mentioned serial killers at some point or another, and although in Danganronpa 2 there wasn't genuinely a serial killer, it was still mentioned, and so I think this is similar to that sort of mention. There are a lot of parallels toward Toko and Korekiyo. They both have killed people outside of the academy, and they did it with malicious intent. There was the ultimate serial killer. I mean, I don't really know how much worse it can get. Another big similarity is the fact that Toko switches to genocider and kills as a coping mechanism, and she kills the people who have hurt her. The thing about Korekiyo is that he just kills to help his sister, which I think is a much more twisted mindset than Genocider, because Genocider is a split personality that Toko can't control and doesn't like. But Korekiyo is completely fine with his actions, which again means that he's not mentally stable, and so I can't entirely blame him for it, but it's still just such an odd and weird mindset to have. Now, I don't want to say much about Kiyo's execution because it was very odd. Well, one thing that I found odd was the fact that his sister threw salt at him. I don't know if that was Monokuma or some kind of fake visual element. There's always really weird stuff in the Danganronpa executions that are never explained, such as Danganronpa Chapter 4's execution, which I can just brush off as Danganronpa being Danganronpa. But it was just really weird. One thing that I did find interesting was the fact that Korekiyo was killed just like Goemon. The thing that I found extremely interesting about that is how they're very similar and yet complete opposites. Goemon was an actual person in history. He was an outlaw who stole and gave to the poor, which can be related to Korekiyo killing people and giving to his sister. But their intentions are the complete opposite, because Goemon was doing what would be called an act of heroism by today's standards to some people. But under Korekiyo's mindset, it's just completely inhumane, and he is breaking the law, but instead of doing it for quote-unquote the right reasons, although that's arguable, he's just doing something extremely twisted and very pointless, and it's very frustrating to me. One thing that did make me extremely sad was the fact that Monodam committed suicide. The entire chapter where the Mono Cubs were just being so rude to him was very Monokuma-like, and honestly, I don't know how to feel about the Mono Cubs because I don't know what they are. I don't know what purpose they serve. They are extremely frustrating to me because they have no compassion or caring, and they're just like Monokuma. But unlike Monokuma, they don't offer any sort of smartness to them because Monokuma is very smart. But they're not, and that's quite frustrating to me because I find intelligence extremely important as an excuse when you're making such a weird and pointless character. Until they have a purpose, they're just extremely frustrating, and it broke my heart how Monodam was the smartest, and you could say, despite him being more of the robotic one, he had more feelings than all of the others, and the fact that he would commit suicide was extremely depressing. Now, one thing that I really did love about this chapter was the ending after the execution, where Himiko finally shows her emotions because Tenko told her to, and honestly, I really appreciated the development that Himiko got during this chapter. I feel like only after Anji's death was Himiko finally starting to show human emotion, and after Tenko's death was where she started to show it extremely. She got extremely mad during the class trials and extremely upset that her two closest people and the people who cared about her the most are dead now, and that's extremely depressing. But the fact that she can learn and grow from that and try to finally listen to Tenko is really nice. Although I do wish she appreciated Tenko while she was still alive. I suppose this is fine. Now, as I said, Himiko did show her emotions, and so the scene where Himiko just starts crying meant so much to me, and I really liked how they put that in there, how it's okay to cry, and how the entire class cries, because me personally, I am very much an emotional person, and I cry a lot, and I think it's a really healthy and good way to express your emotions, and the fact that they were just all crying together meant how close they all were and how far they've come. And I really do hope that in the future, Himiko keeps up this development and does not stay the same person. Because if she goes back to how she was, or if she doesn't develop anymore, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. Now, two more things I want to talk about. One being the scene where Gonta carries Himiko back is so sweet. I thought it was adorable just seeing all of the characters talk, and it finally felt like there was a moment of peace and harmony. And that might just be because Anji's gone, and for me, she was extremely frustrating, and I thought that she was one of the characters who was making the game a lot less enjoyable for me, But now that she's gone, I'm starting to really enjoy all of the characters much more. And I know that sounds cruel, and I don't hate Anji, and I understand her character somewhat, but I just could not stand having her in the group. Now, the last thing we're gonna talk about is the last frame where Kaito seems to be coughing up blood, and as soon as I saw that, I'm like, no, 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 no. And like, all I can still say is no, 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 what, no, because I don't want to verbalize what I'm feeling because I'm scared that that's just gonna solidify in my mind what's gonna happen. I never was confident that Kaito would make it to the end, and I thought that he would die in chapter 2. The fact that they've kept him alive this long is an extreme red flag, and I'm so scared. I feel like I know what's gonna happen, and it's really depressing, but there's nothing I can do about it. And another thing about Kaito is the fact that during the chapter when he appeared to be sick/scared and wouldn't leave his room, that made me terrified. I don't know what it was about that, but I had the worst pit in my stomach every time he didn't come out or he had that sprite. That sprite! It just hurts me. And I didn't realize that Kaito had grown on to me this much, but I am really attached to him, which is not good. It's just heartbreaking to see him like that. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I have feelings and we'll see how it goes. Also, side note, if you're wondering how I reacted to the Oma scene, it's not really a big deal, which is why I didn't mention it, but I've talked about how I think very slowly. And when they were showing his quote-unquote body, I didn't really process it yet. As I was trying to understand what was going on, he already stood up and the illusion was ruined for me. Which I don't think I would have believed it anyway. I feel like that's just too intense for Danganronpa, but if it did happen, that would have been extremely interesting, but I didn't think that he was dead. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's everything that I wanted to talk about. If you have anything else that I didn't mention that you're curious about, or something that I did mention and you agree with or disagree with, I would love it if you commented. I love discussions, and I'm really glad to finally be posting this, and I really do hope to start making more videos and uploading at a more regular pace. Thank you so much for watching. If you have anything you want to say, comment. If you're interested in Danganronpa or this content, please subscribe and like the video because analytics! Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll be here next time, and until next time, mata ne!